1531 Bleams Road are vacant and located on Block 296 on Draft Plan of Subdivision 30T 08206. These lands have been included as part of the application as the two owners have arranged to exchange the lands. The land swap will provide the religious institution land along the east property line and a future road access off of Forest Walk Street. The subject lands are designated neighborhood institutional in the Rosenberg secondary plan, with a small portion of lands located along the Hydro Corridor designated as open space. 1643 Bleams Road is currently zoned to agriculture, while a portion of the subject lands on 1531 Bleams Road are zoned residential 6 zone with special regulations 671R, 672R, and 674R. The owner of the lands are proposing to amend the zoning of the properties to allow the existing religious institution to continue to operate and allow for future residential development on a portion of the lands. The owners have proposed to rezone the lands as follows. So Area 1, this portion of the lands is proposed to be changed to a neighborhood institutional zone to allow the existing church to continue to operate as a religious institution and allow for a future expansion of the church. Area 2, these lands are proposed to be zoned to allow full range of low-density residential uses, including street townhouse dwellings, clustered townhouse dwellings, and low-rise multiple dwellings. Area 3, these lands will be part of the future land swap between the two property owners, and they will allow for future residential developments on the adjacent lands as well. Area 4, these lands are also part of the future land swap between the two property owners, and they'll be owned and used by the church. Finally, Area 5, that's a small triangular portion of lands located below Area 2. This is proposed to be zoned open space, which will permit outdoor recreation uses on the subject lands. The Region of Waterloo and the City of Kitchener's Engineering Division were directly involved in the review of the application. The Region of Waterloo has indicated the requirement for a noise study to address noise on the future residential lands, and the City of Kitchener's Engineering Division requires full municipal services and adequate road access prior to redevelopment of any type of development on the subject lands. Both of these comments have been addressed through holding provisions, which will be applied to the subject lands. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposed zone change will benefit the subject property and surrounding community. The proposed zoning will allow the subject properties to align with the Rosenberg secondary plan and permit residential and institutional uses that are appropriate and compatible for the subject lands and surrounding neighborhood. The proposed zone change will contribute towards the development of a complete community. The new zoning will allow the existing religious institution to continue to operate, permit a future expansion of the church, and provide future housing opportunities within the southwest urban area of Kitchener. In conclusion, planning staff is of the opinion that the proposed zone change demonstrates good planning principles and the new zoning is appropriate for the subject lands and are compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Staff, therefore, recommends approval of the application. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Mr. Dumar. If there isn't any current questions for you, but we'll get back to you after we hear the delegation. We do have delegates, a delegation, Ms. Code from the GSP Group. Welcome, Ms. Code.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Sarah Code, planner with GSP Group. I am pleased to be here this evening on behalf of the property owner of 1643 Bleams Road. We are in support of staff's recommendation to you this evening. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Councillor Neski, is this a question for the delegation? Okay. We have no further questions. Thank you. Councillor Neski.
Yeah, just getting back to your presentation on the subject site. Could you go back to the slide that you had about the air photo of the site? Yeah, that one there. The property. So this property with the church that's there right now on the south side is the only property that's developed. Everything else is vacant.
Mr. Dumart.
Through the chair, that is correct. The lands on the adjacent property at 1531, which are block 296 and the draft plan of subdivision 30T 08206, are vacant.
Okay, so and that's what I was just trying to understand, because you got two property addresses. So 1643 is the church.
Correct.
And then 1531 is the vacant land to the east.
It would be area 4 on this map.
I'm sorry?
On the site contacts map, it's area 4.
Okay. So how far is that subdivision along to the east? It's just still not developed, no services or anything?
It's currently draft approved, and it's not developed, and
Okay,
there's
so no
services that are
services
not out there
started.
yet.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Yeah, could you go back to that aerial view of the map, please? So I see that there are some roads marked in here for future development. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a fair bit of outdoor activity happening, let's say, to the west of that, where the Amman Drive is. I think do they not rent out some of their field space to community groups?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of that happening.
Okay, but I saw Ms. Code nodding her head, so that maybe that's a question I should have asked of you. Would it be possible to have the delegate come down again? I was not aware that you wouldn't be able to answer some of those questions. I apologize. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Code.
For the chair, you are correct that there are neighborhood groups that do use the outdoor recreational space on the property currently, and that is proposed to continue.
Okay. Is there large overhead lighting that lights that field in the evening?
I don't believe so right now, no.
Okay. And all the parking that is required for any activities on that site stays on that site. It doesn't spill over onto Bleams Road, or what I'm concerned about is this forest walkway street that, this site is going to lose some of its area. And are we going to see people complaining in a couple of years that the activities that are happening on that site are spilling over onto the roadways and parking in front of people's houses?
I don't anticipate that being a problem. There is plenty of parking on the space currently, and again, that is proposed to be maintained with any future development.
Okay. The subject area behind Area 1 is Area 2, and this is where development is planned for, did I hear townhouse development?
That would be one option. So through the proposed zoning, low-rise residential uses would be permitted.
And the access point to that property would be from where?
It's proposed to be, thank you, Craig, there's a concept plan that was submitted in support of the zone change application. So you can see there at the south end, there is a access proposed, which is part of the land swap between the neighboring landowners.
I see. Okay, I'm glad you put that up. That's a bit clearer for questions. So what kind of intensity of development are we seeing here? How many units are proposed?
All low-rise. As part of the concept, they are cluster townhouses as well as back-to-back townhouses contemplated on that concept. So the zoning would permit housing up to 10.5 meters, so it is low-rise in nature.
Okay, but roughly what's the concept showing in terms of density?
We are showing 46 units per hectare on that back portion, and the Rosenberg secondary plan permits up to 60 units per hectare.
Okay. I really, the only concern I have is the fact that, you've got a large parking lot going around. Now you've got a stormwater management pond proposed in between, but the activities in behind on the, let's call it the soccer field right now, that the people who are backing onto that property, and I'm not sure what the distance is between, you've got beach volleyball, is that also part of the church activities?
Yes, there are currently beach volleyball courts that are closer to Bleams Road. As part of this concept, we've shown them in a different location.
Oh, I see, okay. I just, I want to avoid us ending up with bylaw concerns, people coming out and, calling their ward councillor and saying, you've got all this activity going on until 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then we have to change that for something that these community groups have been used to doing for many, many years.
Yeah, I think it's an existing condition that has been going on now, and I don't know that there's been many noise complaints from the neighbors across Bleams Road. And given that the soccer fields are located on the west side of the site, I don't know that the houses along Forest Walk Trail would necessarily have an issue with noise.
Okay, yeah, I was just going through my package because I thought I had seen something. Thank you, Ms. Code. I think my further questions are towards staff. Thanks
you.
for coming back down. Yeah, no, there was only one comment because there really isn't anything on that site whatsoever. It's on the opposite side of the road. Okay, I guess that the only concern that I would like to register is that the present activities that are going on there, that they are allowed to continue to go on. I think my understanding is that this church group has, made some great connections and networking with community groups, and that, this new build that's going to happen whenever it builds, that those residents are fully aware and apprised of what's happening in their backyards, and that they're not going to be coming down a couple of years later and saying, we want this activity to cease and desist or to change the timing for that. So that's the only concern I have about this right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I'm prepared to move the recommendation and make a couple comments, if I may.
You can go ahead. There's no one else for comments. Oh.
Just quickly, I agree with the staff report. This group of people, this church, is great partners, and they hosted in conjunction with the Williamsburg Community Association Family Day event that was well attended by the community. They're very community minded, and the simple fact is they could have severed the whole piece and not kept any of those community amenities and put it all towards homes. But they are keeping a piece in order to continue to offer those community programs. And so I think that is great. It's going to be a huge asset for the entire community, so I'm very appreciative of that. But I can appreciate why they want to take a portion off to help cover some of the costs of what they're going to provide there. And so it makes a whole lot of sense that this zone change comes forward. And just to alleviate there's never been one parking concern. It's along Bleems Road, and I don't think I've ever seen anybody parked on Bleems Road. Everything, and there's even multiple kids soccer that happens there with lots of cars, and I've never once seen a car parked on Bleems Road. So it currently does accommodate everything that it needs with the parking, and I've never had one complaint with regards to this property. So I do support this, and I think it's really good planning, and I think it's really community minded, and it will help complete our community in that area and provide some much needed amenities.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bernard, do you have some?
Yes, I do. So before this item comes to an end and before the vote, I'd like to give oral notice that this item and the item that follows, they are formal items, formal meeting under the Planning Act. And if a person or public body does not make oral submission at this meeting or make written submission prior to approval or refusal of these proposals, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added to as a party to a hearing or appeal at the Ontario Municipal Board. That's our usual notice, and I'm giving it now while this item is still open.
Okay, thank you. We have no further comments. I'll just add, I think this looks like a fabulous addition to the area, and having driven by this site numerous times, I myself too have never seen traffic spill over onto Bleems, and this looks like it's just going to continue to be a great space for them. And it's been moved by Councillor Kelly Galloway-Seelock. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We will move on to item number 2, dealing with zone change application in regards to 114-120 Victoria Street South and 114-120 Victoria Street South, Inc. And we'll get to you. Ms. Julianne Weston-Roll will have a 5-minute presentation. Councillor Marsh, you have a conflict to declare?
Yes, I have our family owns property adjacent to this property, so I'm going to declare a conflict of interest.
Okay, conflict is noted. Whenever you're ready, Julianne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to be here this evening to present to you an application for a zone change for the property at 114 to 120 Victoria Street South on behalf of 114 120 Victoria Street South Incorporated. The subject lands are located on the west side of Victoria Street South between Bram Street and Arthur Place, immediately adjacent to the 100 Victoria project that's currently under construction. The subject lands are zoned D6 Warehouse District Zone with a number of special regulations as well as a holding provision. I've just outlined the subject lands in the hatched area so you can see what buildings are currently located on the site. This is a view of the existing former Huck Glove building that is currently located on the subject lands. And this next slide is a view of the proposed development. And this is looking northwest, showing the Huck Glove building that is conserved, fully conserved, with a 3 to 6 story addition that is wrapped around the building, and a proposed 25-story residential tower in behind that is located closer to the 55 Bram Street lands that are currently owned by the city. The 100 Victoria Street property is located on adjacent lands to the east and are currently under construction, as I mentioned earlier. Here's another view looking the opposite direction to the northeast. I have one more slide here that shows the concept of having the new building wrapped around the existing Huck Glove building. Now I'm just going to briefly go over the details of the application. So what's before you this evening is an application for a zone change to permit 300-unit multiple residential use that is 25 stories in height. In addition, the zone change will permit retail uses, including a brew pub up to 1,100 meters squared in size. It will allow for an increase in floor space ratio from 3 to 7 for the entire site through density bonusing in exchange for community benefits. In addition, the zone change will allow for setbacks for buildings on the site, both existing and new, and reductions in parking for the entire site. I mentioned that the bonusing for the site is being used in order to increase the density on site. In exchange for that, the city will be acquiring community benefits. These include the preservation and adaptive reuse of the former Huck Glove building in its entirety, the addition of 300 residential units in the core, water and energy conservation strategies that will be contained within the building, transportation demand measures including bicycle parking, both indoor and outdoor, shower stalls, transit shelter, and public amenity area, approximately 1,100 meters squared, with a private lane accessing from Bram Street. Just some highlights of the development. The development will conserve the heritage building in its entirety, and it's really important to note that the heritage building currently has no status, absolutely no status with the City of Kitchener in terms of heritage. Because of previous council decisions on the matter and a previous owner of the site. In addition, another highlight is that 300 additional residential units will be introduced into the core to support transit usage. The property is also providing the additional employment use in the core in the 3 to 6 story addition that is attached to the Huck Glove building. It is important to note, though, that addition and that particular site does not require the zone change in order to proceed, and actually has received approval in principle for the office addition at the front. In addition, this project provides a more affordable housing option in the downtown. Now to give you some more details about the site, the heritage building, as I mentioned, has no heritage status, and it's being conserved entirely. This is really a good news story for the City of Kitchener. The new addition is contemporary, and therefore the new work is going to be distinguishable from the old original building. The design of the new addition will help mitigate any impacts to the existing building through appropriate setbacks and materials and treatments to the building. The massing of the addition of the Huck building is not overwhelming to the existing building. The sight lines to the Huck Glove building are maintained as you approach on either side of Victoria Street. The 25-story high-rise is well situated behind and will not cast any shadows on the existing Huck Glove building. The additional 300 residential units that are being provided in the core will help support transit usage. The lands are located, as you may recall, within about 800 meters of the central transit station located at the future transit hub site. Additional employment lands in the core are also being provided through the entire development. That is the office building. Again, this is not part of the zone change application. The exterior glazing on the addition where the Huck Glove building meets the new portion of the building is transparent, so as to help visually separate the addition from the building. Additional information about the Huck Glove building is that the reason we were able to even require an HIA and potentially secure the conservation of the Huck Glove building is because the new owners are wishing to pursue increased density through the bonusing in the zoning bylaw. The city can provide bonus density in exchange for community benefits and amenities, such as the conservation of a heritage resource. Lastly, the provision of a more affordable housing option. 300 additional units that will be geared to a variety of residents will provide an option, a housing option other than the existing housing stock in our central neighbourhoods. And lastly, the highlights conclude insofar as the development meets the tall building guidelines. It helps the city meet its intensification goals for the urban growth centre. It conforms to the growth plan, the provincial policy statement, the regional official plan, and the city's own official plan. And lastly, this represents good planning. I am available to answer any questions that you may have on the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Von Westerholt, sorry. We will take questions of staff after we go through the delegation. So I will make note who's clicked in. Okay, our first delegation is Heather Price from GSP Group, Andrew Boesfield from ABA Architects, Matt Boland from Edge Architects. Welcome, Heather.
Good evening, Chair Ioannidis, committee members. My name is Heather Price. I am very pleased to be here to represent the owners on behalf of this zone change application. I'm joined this evening by two project architects involved in this project who have registered as delegations, though I will speak on behalf of the application, and we'll all be available for questions should there be any after this presentation. And for that reason, I'm hoping for a little bit of latitude on my 5 minutes, but I'll do my best. So this evening, I'm going to be just covering at a high level the context. I was listening to Ms. Von Westerholt's presentation, and I think she did a good job of outlining the context and the nature of the application. So my focus will be on what is being proposed, the proposed development, and the details of that. And it will include a walkthrough of the development that's been prepared for you this evening. I'll touch on the supporting studies, including the conclusions of the planning justification report, in my own conclusion, and I'll say it now in case I don't get to it in my 5 minutes, that Council support the application as proposed and approve the recommendations as outlined by staff. So in this slide, you have a view of the proposed development highlighted in yellow and orange. The orange at the front being the office building and the residential mixed-use tower at the back. They are separate buildings, and I think this helps show them in their context with their surroundings, including the 100 Vic development that's adjacent and partly master planned with this proposed development. This view is a plan view of the proposed development with the adjacent development shown together, so you can see how they relate to one another. They are intrinsically linked in terms of access and circulation through the developments, including their parking layouts, both above grade and below grade structures. Another important element, and you'll see it shortly in the rendering, is the corridor that goes between the two buildings of this proposed development. It is intended to be very pedestrian focused, with active uses framing that space. So for a moment, I'll speak to the amenities of the proposed development. Ms. von Westerhold identified some of the at-grade amenities, but there are, I think these pictures help communicate the quality of the space that's being proposed. There's also rooftop amenity space on both the office building and the residential tower. Overall, this space, both public and private, amounts to about 68,000 square feet of amenity, 30% of which is totally publicly accessible. This rooftop space with the tower contains a range of amenities that would appeal to the variety of occupants in that building. I'm going to skim over these building specifics and take you on the tour of the development. So if you follow the screen, we are walking along Bram Street, approaching the interior walkway of the proposed development. As we approach, you can see that car going down the end. That would be an access point to the parking structure. And as we turn around the bend, you can see the pedestrian-centric corridor between the two buildings. This is the backside of Huck Love, with the addition in the background. Now, as we move through this corridor, you get a sense of the scale and proportion and the features that would be along this space. Balconies framing the space, spill-out restaurant and retail uses, higher standard finishes, bollards, pedestrian scale lighting. These are all amenities that will be detailed at the site plan stage, but this shows the developer's intent. And we're also considering some of the suggestions we've heard through the public consultation on how to make this even more pedestrian friendly, including the potential for public art, such as a mural or movable bollards, so that it could be programmed for events. As we exit here, we're actually on the 100 Victoria development right now. So the 100 Vic towers that are under construction are on the left-hand side, and the proposed office building additions on your right-hand side. So on that right-hand side, you can see there is a very contemporary style to that building addition, and a lot of glazing at grade, and that's to allow for transparency and eyes on the street and active uses on the street. It's also important for legibility between the old and the new, and that's a deliberate design approach by the project architect on that building. So we're going to kind of zip through here, approaching the elevation of the original Huck Love factory, with a reveal of the fourth facade that's actually primarily interior to the office addition. There's a high amount of glazing here into an atrium space that is designed to be publicly accessible. So we'll follow this guy who walks through the door into the interior space, and this is publicly accessible space as an extension of the public realm. It's intended to allow for an appreciation of the original Huck Love factory and give it some breathing room from the new occupied space in the office addition. And I think I can probably conclude that the presentation here, or this video here, cognizant of the time, we would continue through and arrive again at the exterior space. We are happy to answer any questions that might arise from this video. I know I zipped through it rather quickly, but I do also want to take just another moment to emphasize the importance of the planning justification report and the conclusions of that document. When we looked at the planning framework from the provincial level all the way down, this proposed development addresses all of those criteria. It is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as well as the regional official plan and the city's own official plan, being part of the innovation district that's planned for mixed-use intensification of this nature. The instruments promote community density bonusing in exchange for community benefits. these instruments allow for additional density for the provision of some of the good features of this development. The planning instruments also include holding provisions as appropriate checks to make sure that the necessary further studies are done before we return to council for final approval. One of those requirements being a record of site condition before the residential tower can get off the ground. So in conclusion, this is, it meets all the criteria, it represents good planning, and we recommend that council approve the zone change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have some questions. Councillor Gazzola and Yaneski, are you for staff or are you for the delegation? Delegation? For both? Okay. Councillor Yaneski?
Both, but I'll wait for the other presentations. She said there's two others.
Through you, Chair Ioannidis, there are two other delegates, but I spoke for everyone. They are here to answer questions if necessary, but we're trying to keep our presentation brief per the rules.
Okay, Councillor Yaneski, go ahead.
I know I have some questions for staff. In regard to this particular project, I think it's a very good project. I do appreciate you coming forward in on this. But you did indicate in terms of the beginning of your presentation the other two towers that are going to be next door. This project, according to the staff report, is going to have 300 units and it's going to be 25 stories, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And its zoning is FSR going to be 7.0.
Correct.
Now, the other building, I'm not too sure which one's Tower 1 or 2. They're both smaller in size. Could we go back to that? Is that possible? That was right at the beginning, I think. Unless you know offhand what the other two towers' heights are and how many units?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are two towers on the adjacent lands. One is 17 stories. The other is 21 stories. And that development has 350 units.
Total?
Total.
Do you know what the difference is between each building?
Not offhand, I apologize.
Okay, so it's 350 total?
650.
Okay. And the FSR on those two other two buildings?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's 8.2 on the adjacent lands.
Total?
Over across the whole development, or can you confirm what you want the density calculated on?
Well, I mean, there's an FSR factor, so I'm not sure what, I mean, it's not, those aren't part of the application, but they are tied in all together. So what was the FSR on those properties? Unless staff would know, I don't know, because it's not in the report. I'm just trying to see how the density all fits in side by side.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the adjacent development has an FSR of 8.2, and the proposed development has an FSR of just under 7.
Okay. And parking and all of those will be underground for all three buildings?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the proposed parking is in a parking structure, partly below grade and partly within the podium of the residential tower. It's in behind residential suites that overlook that interior drive and pedestrian corridor.
Okay, so it's part of the building at the back, sort of speaking. Okay, and how many levels underground?
That's one level underground at the front of the development, near the office portion, and it's two at the rear.
Do you have any further questions, Councillor
Oh, I
Yaneski?
thought you was looking something up to answer.
Oh, that's the answer. Sorry, I'm just getting my notes
okay.
here.
All right, no, I thought you were looking to give me a response to something else, so that's why I was waiting. Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions for staff? Can you click in? Councillor Councillor Gazzola?
Gazzola. I have two simple, non-planning questions. The first one is, are all those people behind you involved with this development?
Yes. And this is just a snippet of the project team.
No, that's very impressive, really. That's good to see. The other thing is, I'm on the Heritage Committee, and when you came to Heritage Committee, I asked something that was a part of that building for many, many years here was the name Hot Glove Company, and I saw in your scenario here that it's back there. So can I assume that that is going to be replaced there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the intent is to reinstate the Huck Glove brand on the front facade facing Victoria Street.
Good, great. I'm really impressed with the project, and I'll have something to say later when it's. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Thanks. Is there any way, Heather, that you can go back a few slides? I know you were trying. It's just that restart the program.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the problem seems to be the size of that video.
Yeah.
I brought a separate USB key that doesn't have the video in it, if that assists.
We'll muddle through my questions, and if we really need to do that, we'll do that. But, okay, so going through some of the comments, one of the comments that I had noticed was about a wind study. So this is perfect. I'm glad I have this. And as you were doing the video, that was, it was really good to see, because I've experienced way too often, and I can tell you, even at the retirement and nursing home where my parents live, which is only 4 stories, there is a wind tunnel there, and it is really uncomfortable. In the report it says, the wind conditions are expected to be suitable. What is suitable? 5 kilometer winds, 7 kilometer like what is suitable?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not the professional that prepared the wind study, but I can say that that analysis has thresholds for different activities such as standing, sitting, walking, fast walking, and that's based on the wind volumes of whether it's suitable for those activities. And the analysis that was done by the wind opinion expert concluded that it was suitable for the intended uses, so walking and standing ideally and sitting ideally in that interior pedestrian-focused courtyard. The analysis also looked at the rooftop amenity space and the wind conditions there, and concluded that it was suitable for those activities during the summer months.
Okay, but that doesn't include running, cycling. There was a moped that you had going through there. Believe me, if it's windy, cycling is no fun. Okay, I'm just saying that because we're trying to make, you've got an FSR which tells me that you're going to have very minimal parking, so I would expect that the parking would be, you've got a transportation demand management plan, so you want to have cyclists and you want to have people who might be using mopeds and scooters and those kind of things. You're going to encourage activities because you've got a rooftop garden there, so you want active people living there. All of those things are really critical to when you step out the door, that people feel comfortable doing those things. So that's more of a comment than a question, but it really ties into how important those wind studies are. And I picked it up in the comments from the residents. There's a comment here about community center. Would the developers, owners consider having some community space that would be rentable by community groups at a reasonable cost? I'll put it out there. It could be something for further discussion. Mm-hmm. The FSR is, did you say 0.7?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
sorry,
it's 7.
Just 7. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Is that the provincial recommendation right now, or is it lower than the provincial recommendation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the province doesn't quite get as specific as regulating through floor space ratio. Rather, the Places to Grow growth plan regulates density in terms of people and jobs per hectare. So when we look for guidance on floor space ratio, we are looking to the local planning instrument, the city official plan.
Okay. I'm not a big fan of the height, I'll confess. I think that I really like the looks coming from Europe. I really like the looks of the whole, old and new, and the glass and the glazing. But I fear that as you're driving from King Street down Victoria towards Joseph Street, you're just going to see an awful lot. I mean, I'm glad it's set back, but it's going to be quite a skyline. So I'm a little bit concerned about the height, and I noted that was some of the comments that residents had made. Has your client considered possibly dropping it down a couple of floors so that it's 17, 21, and maybe 23, or 17, 21, 21? I know it's cost benefit that often these towers are made a little higher. Has it been discussed at all, reducing the height?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the height is a matter that we heard at the informal neighborhood meeting, and so it certainly has been considered. Ultimately, the 25 stories is thought to be the right height for this site, partly taking guidance from the City of Kitchener tall building guidelines that promote variety of building height. And the stepping here of 17 to 21 to 25 is something that we believe is appropriate for this site.
Okay. I do have some more questions.
Okay, can you click back in, please? Thank you. Councillor Etherington?
Through you, Mr. Chair. First off, I wanted to say that I'm very appreciative that the Huck building has been saved. I truly am. It's one of the most beautiful buildings in the city, and I was very concerned right from day one that it was not designated in the first place. But that's a comment. My question is to you and later to staff. Can you tell me if you think the Huck building is overwhelmed by the surrounding development? Do you feel qualified to say that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe the question was, is in my opinion that the original building is overwhelmed?
Yeah.
In my opinion, it is not. The scale here is in keeping with what is envisioned for the Innovation District. There are design policies and guidelines that speak to building massing coming to the street edges in the 4 to 6 story height range, kind of replicating the pattern that was seen as this area of town developed originally as an industrial neighborhood. So following that guidance, in my opinion, the scale of the office building is in keeping with that.
I did not expect you to agree, by the way. There's an abundance of bonusing in here for the developer. It certainly benefits the developer. Why is there absolutely no affordable housing in this development, the surrounding developments? He'll probably say I'm out of line, but in the 6-0 development, there is no affordable housing. And you can argue that, well, it's reasonable accommodation costs, but there is no affordable. I want to ask you, why not?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, the proposed development provides a variety of unit types, a mix of unit types, small to appeal to small, medium, and large scale bachelor, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units to appeal to a wide segment of the market and offer a product and an option for home ownership, as the intent is to ultimately go to condominium tenure. That is the proposed development before you this evening. And given the package of other community benefits, we believe that the density being sought through the zone change application is justified.
Fair enough. If you go elsewhere in the report, tell me when I'm out of time, Mr. Chair, but if you look all the way through this report, you've got a drastic increase in the maximum floor space ratio. That, to me, does not benefit people. It benefits the developer. And if you continue, I'm going through the staff report. You've got a drastic reduction in parking with the reasons for that. That doesn't really benefit the public. There's the heritage considerations which I mentioned and which I really appreciate. But in return for that, it seems to me that it's out of balance what you people are getting in way of bonusing, park space. The community centre, by the way, I was at the public meetings, and those people, Cherry Park, they're not talking about a community centre at all. They're talking about use of some space in there to hold occasional meetings. So they're not talking about momentum building a community centre. So basically, I guess my question is, it seems out of balance, the bonusing in relation to saving the heritage building. Could you comment on that? It's a big question. I know.
It was. Through you, Mr. Chair. Considering the package of community benefits, in the planning justification report that was submitted with the application, we looked to both the current zoning framework that allows for density bonusing for conservation of heritage buildings and for provision of publicly accessible amenity space to guide us. And that, there's a bit of an equation there, but that provides adequate bonusing for a large portion of what's proposed. In looking at some of the other community benefits, we looked to the city's draft new zoning bylaw that implements the city's official plan, that will implement the city's new official plan, as well as the policies that guide bonusing for the downtown, to identify what is considered to be a community benefit, firstly, by referring the OP, and then for how much was informed by the draft new zoning bylaw. And when we considered those things together, concluded that the amount of benefits proposed here exceeds the amount of density bonusing that's needed to get to 7. So I hope that answers your question. There were a lot of components there, but I can expand on any of them if that is of assistance.
Well, it's a good argument. The one that troubles me the most, I guess.
Okay, Councillor.
I'll come back in.
Can you click back in? Thank you. Okay, we don't have any new questions, so Councillor Yaneski, questions? Staff? Okay. Councillor Fernandez, you're with staff too?
Nope, with the delegate.
Okay.
Okay, so just going off of what Councillor Etherington was talking about in terms of reduction of floors, FSR, when I was looking at the parking regulations, or the parking spaces, so my understanding, a total of 180 spaces, parking spaces for the residents, 300 residential units. Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
Check here.
So it's on page 2-6 of the report that Council received.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for the delay. I just had to find my spot.
Just eating up my time, that's
I know,
all.
I'm sorry. I'll stand up here all night, though, if necessary. So the number of spaces provided is actually shared between the residential and the office use. And in the mixed-use tower building, in that podium and below grade, there are 230 stalls provided. And below the office building, there are 27 stalls provided. So for a total of 257 stalls.
Okay. And I was going to ask about the shared, because I know that's something that has 100 Victoria has done as well. Okay. You've got 40 indoor secured spaces for cycling. Have they considered at all doing some bike share? So that if you've got some cycling happening there, that you've also got some opportunities for bike share, because we are really seriously looking at that more and more throughout the city, which would would really help move people around. And I think that might be a suggestion. I think Brian is kind of thinking quizzically that maybe that might be an interesting idea. So that's something I'd kind of like to suggest. Maybe that's not so much of a question. Councillor Etherington talked about affordable housing, and my understanding in the Netherlands is that some of the new development that's happening is happening based on a 40-40-20, and the 40 being affordable housing, the next 40 being sort of mid-range, and the 20 being sort of the ceiling is your limit. Is that a consideration that your client might think about doing? It would still make this space very, could make it affordable for some residents, but it would still give it a higher level in terms of if they're trying to look for a particular client in these areas.
Through the chair, I don't know is the answer. I think what we would like to better understand is what that's not one I'm familiar with, and that's part of why I can't answer that. My clients have a much better understanding of the market ranges that they would be targeting, and perhaps could speak to that and maybe address that question. It's beyond my area of expertise.
Okay. I think I just wanted to sort of put it out there, because I've heard that this is something that, with intensification, going with one set client base, for example, that we want diversity in our city. We want to be able to afford to offer affordable housing, and I'm sure your client does as well. Affordable housing doesn't mean subsidized housing; it just means affordability. But having that range within that building and having employment lands right on site, I'm wondering if they've thought about that, and so that's really my question. I think that's all the questions I have, but I will have comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Etherington?
Just one quick question, I promise you, Mr. Chair, to Heather. The part that relates to park space, you're talking about recreational space that to me does not sound like park space. If you've got balconies to walk your dog on or stuff like that, that doesn't sound like park space. I noticed the report notes that you're a 5-minute walk from Victoria Park. I live on the edge of the park, so I know the park well. It is very busy park a lot of the time, especially in the summer. So I presume you're suggesting that you're going to have 300 people in your building. Well, more. You're going to have close to 1,000 people in your buildings, in the plural, and they're going to be trooping down to Victoria Park, which is fine. But I don't see that as part of the developer's responsibility to provide recreation area. Could you comment on that?
Through the chair, the development provides for several outdoor spaces. They're certainly not park spaces. I agree with you on that. But they do serve some of the purpose for taking your dog out for a walk and the ability to go sit out on your lawn and converse with your neighbors. Some of these types of things that happen in public park spaces are designed into the amenity spaces for this proposed development to some extent.
Okay. we disagree. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Price. Those are all the questions we have for you.
Thank you.
Questions of staff. Councillor Yaneski.
In regards to this proposal and the development of this site, the abutting site, and reading through the report, it talks about FSR and the increase in the FSR. What's the maximum FSR currently permitted under the official plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, currently in the official plan, the maximum FSR in the downtown core is an FSR of 3.
3?
Yes.
For downtown core?
That's correct.
Do we have it higher anywhere else in the city?
The mixed-use corridors, the maximum, there's a range from 1 to 4 in some of our mixed-use corridors.
Okay. So for this area, the maximum is 3. Yet when I read the report, it says that the subject land does not permit the residential uses, does not permit any development in excess of FSR 2.
That is in the zoning.
That's in the zoning?
Yes.
That's correct?
Yeah.
And then you increased it from 2 to 3 through the community of adjustment?
That is correct.
Yes. And that major change of an FSR was considered a minor variance?
That's correct.
In whose opinion?
In mine.
Was it justifiable at the committee of adjustment?
It was.
Supported?
Absolutely.
Now we go from 3 to 7. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If we go from 3 to 7, what's the limit on FSRs permitted anywhere in the city? You said a maximum was 4. Now we're up to 7, but that's through bonusing. Is there a maximum allowed anywhere?
There is no set maximum. The intention of having an FSR of 3 in the urban growth center is to encourage bonusing. That was indicated in the official plan when the city adopted its official plan. The official plan for the downtown or the urban growth center is largely in effect. It hasn't been as affected by appeals as some of the other sections of the new official plan. So the city, when the city adopted its new official plan, encouraged development to occur in this manner. In fact, section 17 something, I don't have the exact section in front of me, specifically deals with bonusing and the community benefits that the city would be looking for in exchange for additional density within its core. And that is the purpose of having the FSR at 3, so that the community can get something in exchange for the additional density. The innovation district, of which these lands are a part of, is a target for intensification, unlike the residential neighborhoods that are being preserved or protected from intensification by directing the intensification in the designated areas for that intensification, such as the innovation district.
I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of the bonusing and being permitted, depending on how much bonusing there is and depending on how much development is required. We have here before us an application of FSR 7, 25 stories, 300 units. Is this what the application was initially submitted?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so there's no negotiations that happen in the meantime? Because sometimes, you start off at 30 and you haggle with staff and you try to work something out and you decrease it or whatever. So I'm just wondering whether the starting point from the submission of the application was higher than what we have here.
No, it was not.
Okay, it wasn't. Okay. From 3.0 to 7.0, you've identified the various items or factors that
community benefits
for bonusing.
Yes.
How do you justify the quantitative portion to determine it being a 7.0? Why isn't, when I look at this, maybe it's only 5.5? How do you arrive at 7? Or maybe could it be maybe even higher than 7? I don't know.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the answer to that is not a simple, straightforward answer.
I know.
Each application has to be reviewed on its own merits and on the community benefits that are before staff at the time. What I look to in terms of guidance are the proposed table and the points value that is currently proposed as part of the Crosby and the new zoning bylaw. So I look for that as guidance. In addition, for matters that are currently permitted in the, keeping in mind, we have had bonusing in our original zoning bylaw since the 90s. With respect to only 3 items. In 85-1, the existing zoning bylaw, we have 3 things that someone can bonus for currently. We have public amenity space, the preservation or conservation of heritage attributes, and the provision of residential units in the downtown. And all of those have been assigned a certain number, and then there's a formula and you have to calculate it. So it's not a straightforward answer, but to give you a brief answer, the bonusing values that have been assigned as part of the exercise of reviewing the comprehensive look at the zoning bylaw through the Crosby project, those are the numbers that were used in order to make the determination for this site.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I knew that...
Councillor Yaneski, your time is over. Can you click back in, please? Before we move forward with more questions to staff, I forgot that we do have another delegation, Ms. Gail Poole. So we'll put a pause on questions of staff, and then we'll receive the delegate. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I'm a resident of the Victoria Park Heritage District, 100 Water Street South, 110 Water Street South. And I'm concerned about this development. What brought to my attention initially was the heritage aspect, but I'm really pleased that the developer has decided to keep the Huck Glove factory. Having said that, I oppose the request to increase the floor space ratio, the FSR, from 3 to 7 in order to allow a 25-story building. It will be visible from my backyard. I'm aware of planning policies to increase the density in the core, but there are also documents, in these same documents actually, that identify heritage as well as livable neighborhoods as very important. The applicant asked that the floor space ratio be increased from 3 to 7 for a 25-story building. The staff uses bonusing provisions, which to me are somewhat mysterious, but since there are no figures attached to any particular bonus. But one bonusing factor does stick out for me. On page 2.4 of the staff report, residential intensification with the provision of 300 residential units. If you can use residential intensification as a bonus to increase the height of a building, then why have a limit of 3.0 in the first place? Developers want to add stories. They get bonuses because they add stories, which increases density. This seems circular to me. I'm not sure how to explain it, and perhaps it cannot be explained. I'm concerned that the quality of life of existing neighborhoods, such as Victoria Park, will be adversely affected by a multiplicity of high-rise buildings surrounding it. The tall buildings themselves will detract from the area. Shadows, changes of view, also the resulting population increase might be more than would be good for the park, as I think Councillor Etherington mentioned. It's very, very busy, especially on a good day in Victoria Park. Second, I'm also concerned about the public amenity part of the plan. Open spaces for residents are on the pedestal roof, and that's great. However, public amenities are not provided at all for visitors to the buildings, to the office buildings, for example. The L-shaped space behind the Huck Glove will be open to car traffic. I did see a video previously which had no cars in it, and tonight's video showed no cars, just a moped. So maybe they've got the message that cars shouldn't be allowed in this open space. The developer says that cars can access the underground garage by other entrances. So why do we have cars here? Green spaces need to be available to the public. The L-shaped space should be limited to pedestrians and be as green as possible. And much has been said about how the downtown can be and should be a vibrant community. That really can't happen if we increase intensity and density without public spaces. Unless you just want to have the public spaces on the sidewalks and you're satisfied with that. The developers think families will be living in this building and that adequate public space is provided on the pedestal. But what about the wider community? The developer does have an opportunity to make this development greener in a locale where very little green space is available. Victoria Park is, well, a 5-minute walk to get to the edge of Victoria Park. To get to the playground in Victoria Park is a 10-minute walk. And it's probably more like 20 if you have small children. Anyway. Why not put a small play area at street level in this L-shaped space? Parents could then sit, enjoy a small snack or a drink. This cannot be done as long as cars are passing nearby. If not green space, consider pavement art. Images of gloves that recall the heritage of the glove factory might be very good and bring attention to the heritage aspects of the development. Third, I would prefer the Huck Glove building to be more visible from the street. Continuing the balcony along the entire face of the third level would set off the Huck Glove building from a new part. Instead, there's a 2-foot-high glassed-in section above the Huck Glove building, producing a continuous flat surface from the ground up. And I do worry about wind in such a situation because there's no break at all in the exterior surface. Setting up another point would be the glass wall that they said is extremely visible from the outside, and the atrium of the building could be put further back and so expose more of the Huck Glove factory. I would hope that they would consider something like that. The developer might even consider a mini museum in the Huck Glove factory and really get the bonuses that they deserve for preserving the building. It would also attract heritage tourists. And some people will be living within these buildings and beside them for generations. We owe it to ourselves and future generations to make them as people-friendly as possible, both for the inhabitants and their neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for the delegate? Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, for coming in and giving me a little kudo on the wind issue. Can you tell me, you're on Water Street, so are you west, east? I'm thinking you're west of the building, is that correct? Or are you, where will the shadow fall on your street?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there won't be any shadow, but the building will be visible from my backyard. The one that's currently under construction, I can see through the pine tree in my backyard. And unless I put another big pine tree in my backyard, I'll see the next two buildings.
Okay, all right. You make some valid points about the idea of using the Huck Glove with some heritage features in it. I think that's certainly a very good suggestion and might be taken into consideration by the developer, because it does create a community space when you do something like that. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Poole. Mr. Poole, can you elaborate a little on the green area or greening of this development? I was kind of intrigued with that. You're talking about a playground, or could you tell me a little more about that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the developers believe that there will be families in this residence. I believe that it's important to have that sort of play area nearby. If I could just give a personal example, as I was with my grandchildren in Rome 2 years ago, I knew that they needed to have some area that they could go and burn off their energy, or at least so that we could continue, and it took about a half an hour for us to find a space that they could, even a small space, and it was no bigger than this chamber, or less, half the chamber. The area in the middle, perhaps. It was just enough. All they needed was a little bit, and then they could continue on. And I felt that this is really very important. We can't depend on central places like the Victoria Park Playground to be the place for all of the different inhabitants of the area.
Thank you. And my last question to you, what did you think about in this report, the parking reductions? Do you have any problem with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think reducing parking or increasing parking fees in public garages goes a long ways to reduce car traffic. I know from personal experience that I've been in cities where taking the bus to the downtown core was way cheaper. I would be paying like $30 a day to park my car, where the bus was a couple of dollars. And to me, it makes a lot of sense to reduce parking to increase bicycle space. The bicycle space provided in this building, I think it was 40 indoor and 18 outdoor spaces. I think the proposal on the development and Cameron and King, that area down there, I think there are 400 residential units and 300 bike spaces. I think that that kind of attention to cycling, walking, just being able to move without a car is very important for downtown development. And to be honest, I think the attention that's being put on the numbers, how many buildings, how many high-rises, how many residents, how many offices, workers are going to be here, that's one part. That's only one part of all of the planning documents that I've read, and I've read quite a few, although I'm not a planner by profession. The need for walkable neighborhoods is also in these documents, and we need to balance that against the higher and more intensive kinds of developments that are going on.
Thank you. And thanks for taking an interest in this project.
Initially, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I got interested through the Huck Glove development, knowing that we need to preserve the heritage. I'm an advocate of heritage. I belong to the Architectural Conservancy, and I believe that we need to go a lot farther to preserve that heritage. A great deal of heritage has been lost in our city. I only think of the paper on Saturday with the overview photograph of what downtown Kitchener looked like many, many years ago, and I regret that is no longer there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Poole. We have no further questions for you. If Councillor Gazzola, questions of staff?
The tall buildings guidelines, has that been passed by this council?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that was your question. Okay, Councillor Fernandez?
Thanks. So a question for Ms. van Westerholt. On page 2-6, we have all of the, I don't know, is that all the bonuses, the bonusing that's happening here? One of the, or the requests, I suppose, sorry. The last one is special regulation to require Section 37 agreement for the density bonusing in exchange for the provision of community benefits. What if we didn't support the special regulation?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to repeat and make sure that I'm understanding the question. If council did not support the special regulation,
right, for the density bonusing in exchange for the provision of community benefits. That's my understanding, is a special regulation to require Section 37 agreement for density bonusing in exchange for the provision of community benefits.
Yes, that needs to be included in a bylaw in order to be able to implement the official plan with respect to the community benefits. It has to be ingrained in a bylaw in order to be something that the city would be able to enter into an agreement on behalf of the municipality.
So that they would be allowed to have the 7 FSR?
Correct. Yeah.
And then the community benefits would be all of the stuff that we've been reading.
Would be the ones that are listed in my report. That's correct.
Okay. One of the other questions I had was on page 2-7. It talks about the community benefits, including energy and water conservation measures. And I've looked a number of times through here, and I don't know whether I'm just not looking in the right spot. Can you tell me what those energy and water conservation measures are?
Specifically, I probably am not the most versed person in that, but my understanding is that the building has been designed to be energy efficient and to use water in a conservative manner. The architects are here, and if there is a specific question like that, that's perhaps something that they might be able to answer in terms of the actual design of the building.
Well, Mr. Chair, if one of the architects is able to answer that question, I'd really appreciate that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've been nominated again.
Okay.
Welcome, Heather.
In short, the office building at the front is going to be designed to LEED Gold or equivalent standard, which includes a multitude of energy and water conservation features to get to that threshold.
Okay, that's and that's the only part? Is there, let me just ask, in the residential building, will there be gray water flushing? Will there be a cistern? Will there be other energy, outside of the standard lighting and the dimmable lights and those kind of things and low flow shower heads? There's other measures that can be used that are even better supportive of energy and water conservation. Have any of those been discussed or considered as part of the architectural design?
That one I might have to defer to the architect on that development. As far as I know, those details aren't quite as far along on the residential tower, given that the office building is further along, already has conditional site plan approval. Okay. That's why we're able to say LEED Gold is the target on that. Okay. The residential, I wouldn't say that they're off the table, but I'm not sure that they're known at this time.
Okay. Roughly timeline right now that you know of for the office building? What's the timeline for building?
Through the chair, depends somewhat on the outcome of the council decision. That is a major milestone. Following the zoning being put into place, there would be a number of subsequent planning approvals that be required. Construction not likely to happen until 2019. Okay,
and then you're saying the residential tower would follow after that?
Through the chair, same approvals would be required for the residential, and it's a little bit further behind the office.
All right. Thank you for engaging my conversation, my questions again. Thank you. Entertaining my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Sorry, Heather, if I could just bug you for one last second. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to answer this question, but it rung true. We actually dealt with an item earlier in the day that was with respect to trying to achieve LEED Gold status. And in that document, I believe it said that it added 5 to 10% to the building cost. So my question to you, or perhaps to one of your many people that will certainly need to buy you a drink because you're doing all the work today, is if you were to achieve LEED Gold, would it not, I'm trying to balance this notion of making your units as affordable as possible versus having them built to the highest standards. So my question is, if you did decide to build the building in the back to LEED Gold standard, would that not translate directly into higher cost units?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you. My other questions are of staff. Thank you, kindly.
Okay.
Here, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the height, I recall that there is no building height limit in downtown or in the city of Kitchener. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so the owners of this property could have certainly come forward with, if they chose, with a building that was much higher if it suited their interest.
They could have, yes. They would have had to provide additional community benefits in order to give, for staff to give consideration for additional density on site.
Okay, very good. I feel a bit of a need to talk about some of the things that the developer has done in this situation. With respect to the Huck Glove building, so it's not designated, it's not listed. So what would be the difficulty if this owner decided he wanted to walk away from this project and the property was sold? What would be the difficulty in destroying that building and having it demolished at this point?
Currently, there is no protection for the building. That is correct.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, again, I'm not sure the heritage understanding of the staff that we have here, but is there like a hierarchy? How important is this building in terms of the buildings that are not even listed in the city of Kitchener? Because I would think it would be among the very top.
I don't know that there is ever one building that is more important to the city of Kitchener's history than another. However, I know that there has been significant efforts to try in the past to have this building at least listed on the Heritage Register. We are not only going to have the building listed, conserved, it is going to be designated ultimately. There's going to be a conservation plan that will look at the short, medium, and long-term work that would be required to conserve this building. And that's something that it is only made possible because of the applications before Council this evening.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Etherington?
For staff, Mr. Chairman, just a quick question on Julianne. Are you satisfied as a senior planner with the recreational facilities provided at this development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am. I understand the concern that was raised by Mr. Poole and that we also heard at the neighborhood information meeting. Right now in the downtown, currently Parkland is not something that is required. I understand that that is something that is being reviewed, and perhaps in the future there will be different requirements. Currently, Parkland is not a requirement for projects in the downtown. They are exempt. Parkland is not to be equated, though, with public amenity area. They do have a number of items that the developer is introducing on their own initiative in order to accommodate the needs of the future residents of that building. We heard a few things that were mentioned by Ms. Price. They include things such as a swimming pool, an active basketball court, a green area, a small green pad for walking your pet. It also includes a small play space up on the. It also includes, I believe, an area where you can just sit and maybe have a barbecue and things of that nature. So there was a number of features that were included. Those were the outdoor features. There are also indoor rooms and facilities that would be available as part of an amenity. So in terms of providing the tenants with something, there is something that is being provided. In terms of a parkland, there is no requirement for parkland, but the hope is that the public amenity space serves at least as a gathering place for people. It is an urban scape. It's not a green space. I'm not going to call it a green space because it isn't a green space, but it is an urban space that is intended to be used for people to interact. It could future potentially have cafes, some restaurants or shops in the area. People will definitely interact. Even the way the surface treatment that is going to be determined will likely be more conducive to that slowing down of a people pace, as opposed to encouraging solely the automobile or vehicles to use this space.
And probably still another difficult question. When the Brown Street parking lot is developed, as I'm sure it will be, into towers and God knows what, would that make people in those buildings make use of these recreational facilities, or are they going to have their own?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know of any proposal yet for the city-owned lands, and I think at that point in time, the city would probably have very specific guidelines in terms of a request for proposal when they entertain selling those lands, and perhaps those types of things could be considered at that time.
Legally, when there is nothing there in the way of you to request parkland downtown, are you allowed to even bring it up to negotiate it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is perhaps something that could be considered through a community benefit if that was something that was being proposed. This development did not propose a parkland in addition to what currently is required. Currently downtown, there is nothing required.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Yaneski.
Back to the FSR. This site has an FSR of 7.0. What's the highest FSR ever approved by the city, anywhere in the city?
I don't know that I can answer that, but there are sites that are higher than this. Definitely, yes.
But you couldn't give me an example, or anybody from staff?
Well, there's how much? The transit hub, I think, is 7.5. There are, I know that there are some that are just site planned approved that are higher density than they didn't require any zone changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Bernard?
Yeah, I was just going to add the transit hub and the property next door.
8.2.
A little louder, please.
Yeah, so the transit hub is higher than 7, and the property immediately next door is in the 8+ range.
Up to 8.
And there are others. There are others. Other sites within the downtown that didn't require any zoning. But like I indicated to council before, we have very permissive FSR bonusing regulations already in our current 85-1 zoning bylaw, and they are very permissive in terms of the amount of density that can be achieved. And there are some sites within our downtown core that exceed this FSR.
Okay. The applicant, when they were talking, indicated, when I was asking for the heights of the property next door, 17 stories and 21 stories, indicated an FSR of 8.2.
That's correct.
That's correct?
Yes.
Is that a combined?
Combined.
Buildings, or is that separate? I didn't get an answer.
It's for the entire site, through you, Mr. Chair. It's the 8.2 is for the entire site.
Okay. And I'm just wondering, if that's 8.2, which is higher than the 7.0, but those buildings are smaller in size.
Yeah, I believe, but the property is larger. It's an equation that is relative to the size of the property. So
Okay, and I'm not disagreeing, I just assumed they looked fairly equal.
That's why I mentioned it's not necessarily an easy formula. You have to look at a number of factors.
Right. When this property went through the Committee of Adjustment, it was increased from 2.0 to 3.0. How much bonusing did you receive from that?
There was no bonusing that was received.
Absolutely
it was a variance.
Nothing?
No.
You just gave them from 2 to 3 outright?
That's correct.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Comments?
Comments? Okay, we'll wait for that. Councillor Gazzola?
I'm ready for comments.
Okay, we'll wait for that. Can you click back in? Councillor Davey?
Comment, and I'll move it if no one has.
Okay, your comments, and you're moving it? Okay, so Councillor Fernandez, we have no further questions for staff. Okay, Councillor Fernandez, go ahead.
Thank you. So, just let's be very clear that, despite Councillor Davies' comments about all of the good things that are happening on this site and that there's preservation of the Huck Glove despite the fact that it's not designated, and that they're building a LEED Gold building for the office tower, but maybe not for the residential tower, that as council, it's our duty and our job to ask questions. We may not make you feel comfortable when we're asking you these questions, but we're representing the citizens of the whole community. People like Mr. Poole and people who travel down Victoria Street, people who work and live in the city core, and people who enjoy Victoria Park. So I wanted to point that out. We're not attacking you, we're just asking questions. And I think that's really important for everybody to understand. In the past, and I see some clients here who I've seen before, and you've done some remarkable work around a number of properties in the city. You've been forward-thinking. You've gone to some different approaches. I think you were one of the first developers to talk about the shared parking, which I think is a great idea. I'm glad to see that you're putting TDM management practices into that building, but you need to go a little bit further, because if you truly want to make this a walkable community in that area, you need to have bike share. You need to have more bike parking. It's good that you have showers available to the office staff that might be biking there, but you can open it up to a lot more of the people who are going to be living within those buildings and in that area. I talked a little bit about the 40-40-20, and maybe it's not here yet. Maybe we're not moving as quickly as the Netherlands and other countries that have a lot less space than we do. But I think it's something that we should start aiming for, because if we really want to make sure that our diverse community, both culturally and age-wise, and lifestyle-wise, then we need to be offering up a wide variety of housing opportunities. And, you've got some great amenities there. You're talking about a pool on the top of that building. You're talking about a basketball net. Can't say that I'd want to be walking my dog around in a circle up at the top there, but that's okay. It might be a little dog, and you might be happy with that, or a Great Big Dane. They don't need a lot of walking. Saying that because you're building a project to LEED Gold, yes, it's going to cost you more, but think about the residents who are going to be living in any of your buildings that are LEED Silver, or LEED Gold, or LEED Platinum. That's going to be saving them money, and in the end, hopefully saving you costs in the long term. Because if they're saving water and they're saving water, or they're saving electricity, hopefully your facilities management people won't have as many problems with things that usually happen in large buildings, and that will keep your building tenants happier overall. So I applaud the fact that you have come forward with a really interesting concept. Again, the old and the new, the glass, the multiple use buildings. Let's not forget that preservation isn't just keeping the outside of a building. I think Mr. Poole had a wonderful idea. Maybe you can combine some amenity space with community use with something, somewhat of a museum. And think about how much happier all of your residents will be living in your building, and anybody who comes to work in that building.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I want to start out on a little different foot because I'm extremely pleased to see what is coming down the road here. The developers have had to answer to a lot of questions tonight, and there has been some very generous bonusing. I'm not an astute planner, so I don't really appreciate all the bonusing that has been done. But I'm really glad to see that it has been done, because the result is that we are saving a heritage building. And I think that's a good example to show to the people that are coming into our community that if you go out of your way to try and help save our heritage, there is something in it for you also. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a developer making a profit. That's what life is all about. So I want to, I'm sure there are things that can be tweaked on this, that can be improved for everybody's sake. Maybe the developer gives a little, we give a little, but there's been a lot of work put into it. Our staff have done a lot of work. I'm sorry I was out of town. I missed the public meeting. I would have liked to have heard what the neighborhood thought of it, but it's tremendous to see a whole number of people from the developer here to be here to support where they're going. And what I am most concerned about and so pleased about was the last time this property was discussed. I was in this council chambers. I know the mayor was. I don't know if anyone else was. But that was trying to get this property put on our listing, not designated, just on our listing to save it from being, it could have been torn down with 30 days notice. And I know that I supported having the property listed, and it was often my case. I was on the losing end of the boat, and it was left off by the council of the day. It was left off. We're fortunate that we don't have a hole in the ground there today, because that's what could have happened, because it wasn't listed. And so now it's not going to be listed, it's going to be designated, which is a tremendous gain for our community. This is one of the first, and maybe we've had to give up a little bit more, but I think it sends a good sign, a good signal out there, and I've always said in the fullness of time, it's amazing what happens, and this is in the fullness of time. I'm so pleased to see that property saved. Maybe it could be better, but I think it goes a long way, so I will support the recommendation of staff.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Etherington.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I've said most of what I had to say. I see an abundance of bonusing and no affordable housing. I also see, from an architectural point of view, a beautiful building, and I see a heritage building being saved. But I don't think that's enough. I don't see any affordable housing in any of the large condos going up along Victoria, my ward, further up King Street, everywhere along the LRT route, and I think we have to include more of that kind of housing. My understanding is that bonuses are supposed to work both ways, and that's what I have a problem with. I don't see much of in the way of bonuses benefiting taxpayers other than the heritage building. It sort of reminds me of the company and management at Sears, where the company makes multi-million profits and the workers get screwed on their pensions. In this case, by not getting any affordable housing, I think the public are on the downside of this deal. Not incredibly badly, because, as I say, I like the development. And while I realize I'm probably whistling Dixie on this council when it comes to the vote, I'm going to oppose at this stage. I'm going to oppose this in order to try to squeeze a few more benefits and a few more affordable units, maybe, out of this huge development. And anything that can be done within reach of the LRT. So my vote might change by the time it gets to council, but at the moment I'll be voting against it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I moved it, so obviously I'll be supporting it. I really like what I see before us. They showed the walkthrough, and it was clear that a lot of work went into trying to make this something that fits well in our community and that it's walkable. Just a couple of comments I wanted to make that I've made in the past. In terms of height, I'm one of those I think I'm less concerned about bonusing in general, because to be frank, I've said it before, I do not like urban sprawl. Whenever I see a building go up a couple more stories, that's a little more countryside saved, a few more trees saved, so I honestly think it's a good thing. Not to mention the fact that, again, you're talking about density in a location that's minutes from it's not just a LRT stop, it's the multimodal hub, like it's the transit core of the whole region. If you're not going to have the high density here and this sort of circle, this walkable circle, where are you going to have it? I've always supported Councillor Ellington with respect to affordable housing, but I think one of the situations we have to really realize is that we can't look to every private developer to check all of the boxes of the city's ideal goals. Otherwise, we'd have all of these regulations that they had to meet in place, but it's just not practical to do that. What we need to look at is what the developer has done in order to achieve some sort of community benefit. And there's lots of community benefits within the structure here itself. But the most important one that stands out, as was mentioned by Councillor Gazzola and others, is the heritage building that's on this site. The developer is literally building a trophy case around this heritage building. And that needs to be acknowledged, and I do acknowledge it, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Mayor Urbanovic?
Thank you very much, Chair Ioannidis. I will be supporting the project that's before us as well, for many of the reasons that have been outlined by my colleagues. Anytime we consider a project like this and look at the additional FSR that's requested in terms of density bonusing, we need to counterbalance it with a variety of things. And I think, as Councillor Gazzola said, it has been a priority for this council in the past to see this building preserved, and in terms of the Huck Love building. And I think, moving forward in this direction is a further example of where, in working with the development community, as was done with both the Tannery building and the Bright Up block building, we find scenarios where multiple objectives can be achieved, where we see a building preserved in an outstanding manner without necessarily having to put a designation on it, although in this particular instance it's being offered up, and I think that's a wonderful additional step that has value for the community associated with it. I do share some of the concerns around is there going to be enough bicycle parking on the site, and I would urge staff to work with the developer to work together on that through the site plan process, because I think just judging by the overall numbers of what we're seeing and what we're likely to see, there's going to be, I don't think it's going to meet the needs of the facility that's proposed. But I think in terms of the heritage, what's being done in terms of the LEED Gold and so on, we are making a number of very positive steps. Would I like to see more happening in terms of some of these buildings around affordable housing? Absolutely. And I think, it boils down to finding a balance, and there will be other projects that don't have a heritage component associated with them where we can push further. But having said that, that does not mean also that there couldn't, for example, be some units potentially purchased by an affordable housing provider in the condominium building and made available as part of the project going forward, and thus incorporated in the building. And certainly, I think as acquisition dollars become available through the federal government and the region, those are the kinds of things that hopefully we'll see happening in some of these projects as well.
Thank you. Councillor Yaneski.
Notwithstanding my questioning of staff on FSR, I wanted to get a good sense of justification from staff in terms of the increase in FSR and the factors that were used to support this application. And the report says so much. Sometimes you just need to dig a little more and get the information from between the lines from staff, and I appreciate the answers that were given. This application clearly falls nicely into the development of the downtown core. It falls into nicely with the tall buildings policies and design requirements. It conforms nicely with the transit scenario of the LRT in the area and being located on an arterial roadway. Being close also to Victoria Park provides another amenity, even though there is no 5% park dedication that was provided through this, although there is open space amenities that have been negotiated through this particular process. I am happy to see that the building, the Huck Glove building is preserved and will be incorporated very nicely as per the designs shown on the PowerPoint presentation by staff or by the applicant, and it will be incorporated in a very positive way, an old with a new, and incorporated as a very flowing type of operation for office uses in that particular building with its add-on. And then, of course, surrounded by the three towers immediately in the area. This is good. This is, in the end, what I see as good development for the city and as staff. If they ever have to go and justify before a board, which I don't think they will, it comes down to two simple words: good planning.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any further comments, and I'll make my comments before we go to vote. What I see here is I see a really incredible project from a developer that's done quite a few great things in this community and continues to raise the bar for this community, which is, I'm grateful that you're building in our city and putting in great design for our community. And as far as with regards to heritage, it's been mentioned a few times, the building could have been flattened. You didn't even really have to provide any amenity space. There's a lot of things that you could have not provided. And that's what part of the planning process is. When we did develop our policies, this was part of the urban core. It's right beside Victoria Park. It's got all the necessary tools, as Councillor Davey has said, to be the transit corridor of the region. And for us to not be really satisfied with this project, I think is the wrong statement to send. I think this is a fabulous project, and we should be supporting it. And with that, recorded vote. Okay, it's been called, recorded vote. It's been moved by Councillor Davey. I should go to my seat. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And that concludes our Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for today. Have a good evening.